guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm doing another redraw for you guys today. I took a piece from 2018 this time. That is 6 years ago that I drew this original piece. It's a D&D character that I made back when I was wanting to get into D&D. I soon found that I didn't quite enjoy the format of it, so I ended up never playing with her. But this character is a human druid. And I really like the design. I've got a friend group that's getting another D&D campaign going, so I kind of wanted to try my hand at redrawing this one, especially since it's been so long since I did the original piece. I thought I could do a lot better with the outfit choices that I made. So let's go ahead and jump on over to the speed draw. I will meet you guys there and we'll talk about it. So first things first with this character, as you can see on the original drawing, she has a very pear-shaped body that's very wide hips and a narrower torso and shoulders. And I really wanted to recreate that in my redraw, but I was having a lot of trouble with it. I think I've fallen out of the habit of trying to draw a lot of different body shapes, and I usually just end up with the same sort of muscular hourglass figure. So something I found I need to focus on is drawing a lot of different body types. Now for this piece in particular, her stance in the original wasn't very dynamic, it wasn't very interesting, and it also seemed like the character was a little bit unbalanced with her standing with the two legs just straight down the middle. So what I decided to do was mimic the bent left arm, and I actually brought her right knee up to be in that bent position as well. And in addition to making a much more interesting pose, I think it also balances out the character and makes her look a lot more sturdy. And on top of all of that, I gave her a much heavier, much more impressive looking staff. The one that I gave her originally kind of just looks like a walking stick. It doesn't really look like it has a specific purpose. This one that she's holding over her shoulder, I definitely increased the size and the weight of it and then gave it a good crook on the end that is going to hold this sort of glowing gem, which is supposed to be the source of her powers. This hand in particular, the one holding the staff, I had a lot of trouble with, and the reason being I couldn't quite wrap my head around how this hand was going to hold on to something that was as thick as this staff. And later down the line, I actually end up making that part of the staff a lot thinner in order for her hand to grip it. Now, as you can see here, I'm doing a lot of adjustments with the sketch of the body. Again, I was really trying to get that nice pear shape, but I think in addition to me being a little out of practice with different body shapes, the new stance was throwing me off a lot. It was easy to get the really like wide looking hips with her legs straight down because you could really exaggerate the hips in comparison to the rest of her legs. With the leg propped up like this, it was kind of hard to tell that her hips were a lot bigger than her shoulders were supposed to be. For the outfit, I know this outfit has a lot of problems. I too was affected by the too many belt character design. So for this outfit, what I decided to do was I just went ahead and drew in the original outfit that I had created, and I would go back in later and sort of refine it a little bit, come up with something new. I definitely kept a lot of the original design. I did like the sort of wild kind of feral feel that it gave her, but I just added a few elements to make it a little more textured, a little more interesting. Here we are going in now with that exact texturing. I took this very basic vest top and I added a little bit of a halter to it. And again, it doesn't serve any purpose. It's just to make the outfit look more appealing, look more interesting and detailed, so it's not just a piece of fabric that's sewn in the middle. And again, I say this all the time, but my number one tip for drawing clothing is just to include the seams. You could draw just a square piece of fabric over someone's body. If you include the seams and just a few lines for wrinkles in that, it will look like clothing no matter what you do. It could be a potato sack and it'll look realistic. So I did keep this weird belt fabric skirt and I actually ended up getting rid of the little shorts that were underneath the skirt on the original character because I really wanted her to look like she just kind of fashioned this together because she had to for society standards, and she didn't really care whether or not it was falling off. Again, I wanted that sort of feral child wild feeling to it. And then going in with the boots in the original one looked like cardboard. There's no detail or anything interesting about them whatsoever. So I decided to add just a couple buckles, a couple seams, some details here and there. I also added an armband on her left arm and a glove on her right hand. Again, just to give your eye something to look at. Even though it's not the best clothing design I could have come up with, I do think it helps the character look a lot more interesting. Going in with the line art here, the original character had these really, really dark lined eyes, and I honestly think that's because I was just not that skilled with the traditional line art. I'm definitely a digital artist. My traditional skills are a little bit rusty. So I was going over the eyes again and again with this line art to try and get them to look right, which kind of had the same effect as when you're putting on a cat eye and you screw up on one eye, so you have to fix it and go over it on the other eye, and then you screw up on that eye and you have to fix it on the other eye, and you end up with these big black raccoon eyes. I think that's what happened in the original picture. I kept all the ear jewelry on her, especially the big tunnel and the ear weight. And then I also made the jewelry, when I get to coloring, I made it mismatched metal because I wanted it to look scavenged, or like she'd sort of picked it up along the way. And the hair here, as always, is going to take ages. I do really like on this one, you can see kind of in the original, the left side of her head is shaven and the right side is this really big, really full, luscious mop of green hair. I remember in the original piece, I really wanted it to look really big and flowing and full as possible, so that it showed, even though half her head was shaved, she did still have this really thick, luscious hair. Now, it is kind of hard to see in the original what exactly is going on, so I tried to make it very, very clear in this redraw that the left side of her head is in fact shaved. A little trick that I've learned over the years in regards to drawing hair, because hair for me is the biggest time drain when it comes to art. I will draw a little bit of the hair and then I will move on to something else, generally working from the top down. So the face first, and then I'll go into the hair, and then I'll start working on maybe the shoulders and the neck and the top, and then I'll go into a little bit more of the hair and then keep working my way down, instead of just trying to draw all the hair at once, because I found what happens when I do that is I kind of get lost in the process a little bit, and so some of the hair will come out looking really, really detailed. Some like larger chunks will look like they don't have enough detail in them at all. And again, that's just because I really get lost in the process and kind of lose track of what I'm doing in regards to drawing all these different locks of hair coming down. So I've definitely found that taking a break from the hair, working on something else, and then coming back to the hair is a really beneficial process, because it gets me away from the mindset of just drawing hair for a little while and refreshes me and lets me work on something else. And then by the time I have to go back and draw more hair, I'm in a clearer headspace and I can focus a little bit more on what I'm doing instead of just going on autopilot. I also think I've gotten a lot better at drawing wood texture, especially since 2016. I absolutely love how this staff came out. You can see where her hand is grasping the staff. It's definitely like a lot thinner there. I'm gonna say it's just a handle. It's fine, don't worry about it. But that's definitely where I was having some issues with that. The rest of it, however, I love the little curving end, how it sort of twists around and then curls in onto itself. I'm so pleased with how that turned out. Again, with the line art here, I'm trying to accentuate that she has a smaller torso and rib cage and wider hips. I don't think it worked super well. You can definitely tell she's very hippie. She is very hourglass figure. So that's just something I'm gonna need to work on in the future, is experimenting with a lot of different body types. For this hand, I've noticed in a lot of my previous speed draws that I've had this issue with making the hands different sizes. So I was really like zooming in and out on this one and trying to make sure those hands matched up in terms of size. I think they match pretty well. I think the only issue is the left hand might be a little bit thicker than the right hand, which has a bit thinner fingers, but they did match up in size pretty evenly. Doing this lovely rag skirt belt thing we've got going on here. Again, adding those lines onto the belt as seams to make it look like fabric, make it look like leather. We've got a leather sort of satchel bag off to the side there, which is supposed to be hanging off of the belt. And then I was really happy with the fabric pulling over her right leg. I really tried to make it look stretched, whereas the rest of the fabric was kind of draped. So I'm very pleased with how that turned out. I think I got that stretching effect to come across very well. I added a couple little garters onto the socks here because, again, I was going for that sort of wild child feral aesthetic. I had a feeling her socks would be falling down a lot, so I added the garters to them. And it adds a little bit of like a sultry element to it. Shoes, I swear, are just the most tedious thing in the world to draw, but if you put the work and effort into them, they look amazing. These aren't the best shoes that I've ever drawn. I think I was rushing with them a little bit because I really just didn't want to focus on them for this drawing. But they did definitely turn out a lot better than the 2018 version. So just taking my time, adding some lacing, some belts, a lot of seams to the boots, again, to just make them look real. Little side tangent, but the best pair of shoes I ever drew, I was so upset. I was drawing this fan art for a friend of mine, and they had on these amazing, like really complex boots. And I filmed the whole process, and I actually wanted to do a tutorial on how to draw shoes and boots in particularly with the footage that I had filmed. And then my computer ran out of storage space halfway through filming. The video got cut and I lost the footage because it got corrupted. It was so upsetting. I had put so much work and effort into these boots specifically to make a video tutorial out of it, and I had none of it. It was one of the only times that I was like very determined to make a tutorial out of something, and it just crashed on me. All right, finishing up the boots here and then going back in with the hair. Again, we're doing that back and forth technique so I don't get too burnt out on drawing the hair and lose myself in the details. I think the hair is the last thing we have to do here, just finishing that all up, and then we can move into color, which is very exciting. I've said this a few times before, line art is a very zen process for me. I really enjoy doing it. It's probably my second favorite part of the drawing process, my favorites being the sketching and the highlighting, but we're about to get into my least favorite part, which is the flat coloring. I really hate doing this because I feel like all the steps before flat coloring make your art look really, really good. With the sketching, you've got all these stray lines that look very artistic and full of movement. With the line art, it takes away from that movement a little bit, but your piece ends up looking really crisp and clean. And then we get to the flat coloring, where I personally do not like the process. I think it's very aggravating. And then once you've gone through all this work to get the base colors down, to get the flat colors down, it looks just that. It looks flat. And I really, really hate how my pieces look after the flat coloring. It's the point where I've given up on most of my abandoned art is right after the flat colors. So you really just gotta push through to that shading so you don't give up too quickly. So with the hair here, what I'm doing is I'm coloring the whole head, including the shaved part, in with this one green color because that's going to be the majority of the hair. And then I'm going back over with a layer that is clipped to this green, which means you can't draw outside of the designated green area, and I'm drawing the roots on top of it, so the shaved head and all these little roots underneath that you can see in her bangs. The reason I do this is not for any artistic purposes, it's just a way of helping myself keep my layers organized, because I know that a layer clipped to the hair is going to be a layer that is influencing the hair. All right. These eyes, I'm going to do a tutorial at some point on how I draw eyes and specifically how I color eyes, but this eye color, hazel is what it's supposed to be. It's a mixture of green and brown. Has always been such a difficult color for me to portray. These colors are on very conflicting sides of the color wheel, so they don't blend together very nicely. It ends up looking very pea soupy. So every time I have to do hazel eyes, it is a little bit of a struggle. I think these ones turned out very well because they had the green of the hair and the brown of the wooden staff to kind of reflect off of. But definitely right now they're looking very, very rough. I started off with blue for this skirt because I thought it would tie in nicely with the green. But then I realized that I had blue, green, and what is essentially a dark orange for the brown, all commingling in this piece, and it was a very sort of off-putting mixture of colors. So what I decided to do instead is change it to this nice blushy pink color, which is a lot closer to orange, so it would match the browns a lot better and then also complement the greens. I think that was a really, really nice decision on my part. I'm very happy that I didn't go with that original blue. The pinkish red looks a lot earthier too, so again, we're going for that feral child kind of aesthetic. I sort of played around with making the leaves kind of glowing at first, but once I zoomed out, I immediately didn't like it, so I changed it back to a more neutral color. I did add the blue into the piece on the glowing gem there, and the reason I did that was because I did want something very different in this piece. I wanted the gem to be a completely different color from everything else. With the leather here, what I decided to do was just color different parts of it, different shades of brown. And the reason I'm doing that is just to sort of distinguish the different leather bits from each other so that it doesn't look like one solid blob of color. And I really like that I did this because it gives the eye something to hold on to, so you're not looking over a whole monotone piece. Now, even though I did do the mismatched metals for the jewelry in her ears, I wanted to keep all the metal on her outfit the same brass color, just so that it didn't look too crowded or too complicated. I wanted the viewers to be able to tell that the outfit was all the same material, and I felt like if I had changed the metals around, it might mess with that perception a little bit. Finally, moving into the cell shading. Again, that hair is gonna take forever, so we're just gonna have to wait it out a little bit. But this is the part where I can finally relax a little bit because the piece is starting to come together. It doesn't look like really flat blocked colors anymore. I can see some dimension in here. So I am going to soft shade this piece as well, but I always add a little bit of cell shading to my soft shaded pieces because I think it adds another element of dimension that the piece really deserves. This wood here also took a long time. It's a little bit like hair texture in the sense that you are drawing the grains of the wood, and it does sort of look like hair wrapping around something if you really think about it. Here we are with the hair, taking our sweet time as usual. I really love doing top knots on characters. It's a nice way to get the hair out of the face, but still have a little bit flowing down the back. Braids, I've always been so particular about. I used to put so much detail into them because I wanted them to blend into the hair to look like hair. But I've realized recently that if you draw something that looks like a rope in front of hair, people are going to perceive it as a braid if it is the same color and texture. So I tend to do them really quickly now just so I can get them out of the way. More of this wood grain texture, putting a little bit of shading on the leaves, not too much. I didn't want the eye to focus on them. Again, we're just doing cell shading on certain points that have a little bit of a deeper shadow on them or any kind of drop shadow. So for example, the chin is always going to cast a drop shadow. It's a shadow being cast by my chin onto my neck. That's what's called a drop shadow. If something is blocking a light source, it will cast a shadow onto whatever's next to it. So I always like to include the drop shadows in the cell shading process. The fabric here is going to be pretty easy to shade. I did outline, for the most part, a lot of the shadows, so I just have to follow those outlines. And then I tend to add in just a few more shadows wherever I feel necessary. There's not really like a strict process that I don't think anyone can follow with art. A lot of it is intuition, and that intuition is inevitably going to come with practice, lots and lots of practice. The cell shading step is probably the longest I take on any piece. It might be rivaled by the line art, but I feel like it could go either way. And that's just because I'm trying to portray a lot of really, really tiny details. So I like to take my time and make sure that everything is properly filled out. Again, I'm not focusing too heavily on the shoes here. I did invest a lot more time in them than I did in the original one, but I didn't want them to be the main focus, so I'm not going into too much detail. All right, and we are on to the soft shading. What I do here for pieces where I feel like I'm going to have a hard time seeing the shading is I will actually fill in where I want the shading to be with a light purple color, and then once I'm satisfied, I will change the layer blending mode to multiply. And that's what gives me that nice, soft, cool drop shadow. Sometimes I'll do the soft shading in the multiply layer so you can see the shading progress as I'm working on it. But a lot of times, just when I feel like I won't be able to see what the shading is doing, I will work in that light purple layer first, and then I'll switch it to the multiply blending mode, which is exactly what I'm going to be doing with the hair here as well. With the hair, it's notoriously difficult to see exactly what I'm shading, so I go in with the true color first, and then I'll switch it to the blending mode later. It's really difficult to see how effective this is without having a side-by-side comparison, but this soft shading really, really does help sort of enhance the character a lot. And I'm just going very, very quickly with this shading too, because I've found that if I am too detail-oriented with the soft shading, things tend to end up looking really muddy really quickly. So just going very, very quickly over everything, trying to be as soft as possible. And our second to last step here is highlighting, one of my favorites. This is the part where the piece truly comes together for me. I really, really love highlighting. It just adds that like finishing touch, that little bit of polish, the varnish on a painting. It makes the piece just look complete, and I absolutely love it. I've got a lot of spots that I just tend to hit with highlights. So for example, the face, I will do the bridge of the nose. I'll line the top lip with some highlight and do some highlighting on the bottom lip to make it look shiny. Sometimes I will do the inner corner of the eye if I feel like the character needs it. On this one I didn't because I felt like it might make her look like she's wearing too much makeup. And then for the most part, I just kind of follow the outlines with the shading, being aware, of course, of where the light source is coming from. For this one, the light source is, for the most part, the glowing crystal in her staff. So I'm following the line art of the piece and just sticking to either the outside of the line art. So for example, her right arm, I am highlighting next to the line art that is further away from her body. And then closer to the light source I get, I will be highlighting the line art that is closer to the light source. And once again, using that technique where I work on the hair a little bit and work on something else and then come back to the hair, because it is just so easy to get lost in the details of drawing that hair. Once I kind of get away from the light source, as I'm doing with the bottom of the skirt here and the boots as well, I kind of just go wherever I feel like highlighting needs to be done. There's not really any rhyme or reason to it, especially with this sort of edge lighting. It'll look good no matter what you do. Adding that nice glow in. I just did that on a screen layer and put it on top of everything, so it looks like it's casting this really bold glow. And then final steps here. I'm doing the same thing I do for all my pieces that don't have a background. I'm putting that thick black outline around the outside of everything. This character, there was a lot going on with her, so I didn't want to take away from all those details by doing a really thick black outline. So while it is bolder and more noticeable than the line art, I'm trying to keep it pretty light so that, again, it doesn't take away from the details of the character. And with that outline finished up, that is the finished piece. So thank you guys so much for being here today with me on this redraw of the Druid D&D character that I did back in 2018. If you want to see this piece in full as well as more art like this, it is on my Instagram right now under Threadwing. You can also find me on TikTok, and I'm now streaming live on Twitch every Tuesday and Thursday at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And if you would like to see behind the scenes shots of this piece and all my work and just support me a little bit further, you can find me on Patreon, again under Threadwing. I am Threadwing on all of these accounts. And make sure you subscribe to this channel so you can find your way back here for next week's video. I will see you all later. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye!